I'd set up camp in a pine grove about 4 miles off the main trail, in a spot I'd marked on my map a few weeks earlier. It wasn't on any established route, just a clearing I'd found during a day hike and thought would make a quiet, peaceful place to spend the night. There was no one else around for miles. That was the appeal. I'd been needing to get away from people, from noise, from everything. Just me, my gear, and the woods. I reached the grove late in the afternoon after a long, slow hike through rough terrain. The air smelled like warm pine and dirt. The needles were thick underfoot, soft enough to mute footsteps, and there were no signs of recent animal activity. No fresh scat, no claw marks on the trees, nothing to worry me. I set up my tent on a slight rise near the edge of the grove where the trees thinned just enough to let a bit of sky through. The ground there was drier, not soggy like lower down, and it gave me a better line of sight. I cooked a simple meal, rice and beans with some jerky mixed in, boiled water for tea, and sat back against a log to eat as the sun went down. The light filtered through the trees in bands, golden and fading. The quiet was deep, not dead silence, but the kind of quiet you get way out there. Just wind moving through branches, the occasional creak of an old tree swaying, the distant chirp of birds settling down for the night. No cars, no voices, no light except the faint glow from my little fire and, eventually, the stars. I was tired, the kind of tired that comes from a full day's hike with a heavy pack. Once I finished eating, I doused the fire and cleaned everything up. I was strict about that, no smells near the tent. I walked a ways off and hung my food bag from a solid branch with a bear hang, even though I hadn't seen any signs of bears. It's just habit. I crawled into the tent, unrolled my sleeping pad and bag, and lay down. My body ached, but in a good way. Muscles tired, but not hurting. I remember checking the time, just past 10 p.m., then listening to the breeze outside until I fell asleep. I woke up in the dark. Not the kind of groggy, half-asleep wake-up where you drift back off. I mean wide awake, eyes open, heart pounding. I didn't know what had stirred me at first. There was no sound. My tent was zipped shut, and everything inside was still. I reached for my headlamp, flicked it on, and checked the time. 3:08 a.m. I lay still, listening. Nothing. Just wind, maybe a small branch shifting above me. I was about to turn off the light and try to sleep again when it happened. Knock, knock, knock. 3 solid taps. Not loud, but clear. Against the fabric of the tent. Right by my left shoulder. I froze. At first, I thought maybe a branch had fallen and tapped the side. But it wasn't random, it was 3 knocks, evenly spaced. The kind of rhythm a person would make. I didn't breathe for a few seconds, just listened. My mind ran through possibilities. An animal? Maybe. Person? That made less sense. There was nobody out here. I hadn't passed another hiker all day, hadn't seen any footprints, no sign of anyone else on the stretch. The forest wasn't used much except by the occasional hunter in season, and that was months away. Besides, who walks up to a stranger's tent in the middle of the night and taps on it? I slowly reached down and picked up the knife I always keep beside me when camping. Nothing special, just a fixed blade with a 4-inch edge, good steel, sharp. I kept it low and close. My other hand hovered over the zipper of the tent door, not pulling it yet. I waited, trying to hear if anything was moving outside. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same pressure. But this time it was on the opposite side of the tent. Behind me, that sent a shock through me. There was no way someone could have walked around to the other side without me hearing something. Pine needles aren't silent, especially dry ones, and the tent's small, just big enough for one person and a pack. For the knock to come from the other side, whoever or whatever, it was had to move fast and quiet. Too quiet. I sat up fast and shouted, loud and rough. Just a single yell trying to scare off whatever was out there. Nothing. No running footsteps. No crack of branches. Just silence. I waited maybe 30 seconds, heart racing. Then I slowly unzipped the front of the tent, blade in hand, and pushed the flap aside. My headlamp beam cut through the dark, lighting up the pine trunks in front of me. I stepped out, crouched low, swung the light left, right, scanning for movement. Nothing. I circled the tent slowly, eyes wide, every sense on edge. Still nothing. No tracks in the pine needles, no sign of disturbance. The needles were thick, dry, soft. They should have shown some kind of print, a boot mark, paw print, anything. But there was nothing. I even swept my hand through them, trying to see if they'd been brushed or shifted. Still nothing. Just untouched forest floor. I stood there for a long while, maybe 10 minutes, just listening and scanning. Every so often, the wind stirred a branch. Once, an owl called out in the distance, but otherwise nothing. Eventually, I crawled back into the tent, zipped it shut, and sat upright with the knife in my lap and my headlamp still on. I didn't lay down again, just sat there, trying to calm myself, waiting to see if it would happen again. Didn't. The rest of the night passed in silence. I didn't sleep, just sat there in that tense kind of alert you get when your body refuses to relax. Every time the wind moved, I tensed. Every time a branch creaked, I jumped. But the knocking never came back. At first light, I got out of the tent again and did another full circle. Still no prints. I walked a bit further out in widening circles, looking for broken branches or anything that might give me a clue. Nothing. Everything looked untouched, undisturbed. If someone had been there, they were either a ghost, which I don't believe in, or damn good at covering their tracks. And if it was an animal, it didn't leave the usual signs. There weren't any drag marks or scuff marks or droppings. Just still, dry forest. I packed up quick. I didn't eat breakfast, didn't make coffee. I just wanted out. I kept the knife out while I broke down camp, my head jerking up every time a twig snapped or a squirrel chattered. The whole walk back, I kept checking over my shoulder. I didn't relax until I saw the parking lot, until I got in the car and locked the doors. It's been months since that trip, and I've gone back out since. I still camp alone. I still love being out in the woods, but I haven't been back to that grove. I probably won't. I've gone over every possibility in my head. Maybe it was a bear. Maybe it sniffed around, got curious, poked at the tent, then wandered off. But bears don't knock 3 times with the same rhythm. And they don't move silently from one side of the tent to the other without making a sound or leaving prints. Maybe it was a person. Maybe someone was out there messing with me. But how would they have gotten out there without me seeing signs of them? And why? No one's gonna hike miles into thick woods just to screw with a stranger's tent. I've thought about wind. Maybe a branch tapped the tent. But again, it was too deliberate. 3 knocks, then 3 more. Not random, and on different sides. At ground level, not up near the top where a branch would swing. So I'm left with this. Something or someone came to my tent in the middle of the night, knocked on it, then knocked again on the other side, left no tracks, made no sound, never came back, and I'll never know why. That's the part that sticks with me. Not fear exactly, not even curiosity, just that hollow, unsettled feeling that comes from not knowing, from having no answer, from having a clean, logical world suddenly crack just a little around the edges. I don't think it was anything supernatural. I don't believe in that. But I do believe in people doing strange things for strange reasons. I believe in animals acting in ways we don't expect. I believe in the forest hiding more than we think it does. Whatever it was, it didn't hurt me. It didn't come back. But it knocked. Twice. That's enough. And now, every time I camp, no matter how far I am from that grove, I think about those knocks. And I listen. I listen to every little sound in the night. Because once something like that happens, you don't ever really forget it. We got to the campsite around noon, deep in the Ozarks. It was early October, the kind of time when the trees looked like they were bleeding color. Reds, oranges, and browns mixed with the dark green of the pines. The air was cool, crisp, the kind that makes your breath show up even when the sun's out. We picked a site off an old logging road, a flat stretch above a shallow valley, near a dry creek bed. No other campers around, just the woods, the sound of leaves in the wind, and the occasional caw of a crow in the distance. There were 4 of us, me, my cousin Chris, his older brother Mike, and our friend Nate. We were all in our late 20s, all outdoorsy enough to know how to set up a tent and keep a fire going. This trip wasn't anything new for us. We did a lot of camping growing up, and every fall we tried to get together for a long weekend somewhere remote, somewhere off the map. We weren't looking for trouble, just wanted peace, maybe a little hunting, maybe a few drinks by the fire. Chris had brought an old portable radio with him. It was one of those gray, beat-up plastic ones with a thick antenna and a leather strap. I remembered it from years ago. His dad used to use it in the garage when he worked on cars. It had this heavy, clunky feel to it. He said he brought it because he liked the crackle of static in the background. Said it reminded him of late nights in deer camps when he was a kid, half asleep listening to faint country music from distant stations. We didn't expect it to work. We were too deep in the woods. But he turned it on anyway sometime that first afternoon, fiddled with the knobs, got nothing but a soft static that came and went. No music, no voices, just fuzz. He left it on the picnic table under the tarp we set up. After a few minutes of nothing, he shut it off and didn't touch it again. None of us thought about it after that. We spent the day setting up camp, getting firewood, and cooking a late lunch. The rest of the afternoon, we just relaxed. Nate and I hiked down to the creek bed, mostly dry except for a few pools of stagnant water. We found animal tracks in the mud. Raccoon, maybe a coyote, something bigger too. Looked like a deer had come through recently. No sign of people. That night was quiet, dead quiet. No bugs, no frogs, no wind. Just the fire popping and the sound of one of the guys cracking a beer every now and then. We talked about work, old stories, the kind of stuff people talk about when they're in the middle of nowhere with nothing else to do. By midnight, we were winding down. One by one, we put out our cigarettes, zipped into our sleeping bags, and let the fire burn low. The sky was clear, stars spread thick across it, the kind of dark you only get far from any town or road. I woke up around 2 a.m., no idea why. It was cold. My nose stung from breathing in the chill. My sleeping bag was zip tight, but I could still feel the cold pressing in through the thin fabric of the tent. The fire had burned out to glowing coals. Everything was still, but not peaceful. Felt too still, like the woods were holding their breath. Then the radio turned on. I knew the sound right away, that burst of harsh static. Loud, too loud. It wasn't a soft background hiss. It was a blast, sharp enough to make my heart skip. I sat up fast, knocking my shoulder into the side of the tent. I thought maybe someone had rolled onto the power button. Maybe it got bumped. That was the first thing my brain went to, trying to make sense of it. But it didn't stop. Kept hissing and crackling, the sound moving in and out like a wave, louder and softer, like something was trying to tune into a signal but couldn't quite lock on. I unzipped the tent and stepped out into the cold. Chris and Mike were already out of theirs, standing by the fire pit, both with that half-awake, half-scared look people get when they're trying not to panic. The radio was still on the table, right where we left it. The antenna was up, though none of us remembered pulling it out. The static was worse up close, real loud. No voices, no music, just this teeth-gritting buzz that seemed to pulse like it was alive. Then it changed. In between the bursts of white noise, I heard something soft, like a whisper, just once. Came and went so fast I thought maybe it was the wind. But then it came again. A voice, faint, buried in the static, like someone trying to speak from a long way off through a storm. I stepped closer. I shouldn't have, but I did. The whisper came again, clearer this time. Just one word. My name. I froze. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Then it said Chris's name, then Mike's, then Nate's. One by one, slow and quiet, like someone reading a list. The voice had no tone, no accent, no emotion. It was flat, like a robot almost, but not mechanical. More like someone who was trying to speak but didn't quite know how. The names were spaced out with bursts of static in between, like it was coming through on a broken loop. No one said anything. We just stood there, staring at that old radio like it had grown teeth. Then it cut off. Just like that. Silence. The kind of silence that hurts your ears after loud noise. The kind that feels heavy. We waited, expecting it to start again. But it didn't. It just sat there, quiet. The fire had almost gone out completely by then. No one moved to add wood. We didn't talk. After a minute, we all drifted back to our tents. But I don't think any of us actually slept. I know I didn't. I just laid there, eyes open, trying to make sense of it. The next morning, we all looked like shit. Bags under our eyes, jittery movements, jumpy at every sound. The air felt colder, and the woods seemed darker than the day before. We didn't talk about the radio. Not right away. We just started packing. No one said it, but we all knew we weren't staying another night. Chris was the one who noticed the batteries. He picked up the radio, flipped it over, and opened the battery compartment. It was empty. No corrosion. No acid leak. Just clean metal contacts. Like it had never had batteries in it at all. That stopped all of us cold. I asked Chris if he'd put batteries in before we left. He swore he didn't. He said he meant to but forgot. Mike and Nate both said they hadn't touched it. I checked our gear. We didn't even bring spare batteries. None in the cooking kit. None in the emergency flashlight pack. Nothing. We stood around the table, that stupid old radio between us, trying to figure it out. Radios don't work without power. Static doesn't come out of empty boxes. Voices don't whisper names through things that shouldn't be working. There wasn't anything else to say. We packed up in silence, took the trash, doused the fire, checked for any trace we left behind. We hiked back to the truck with our gear strapped tight and our eyes scanning the trees the whole way out. It's been a few years since that trip. We haven't gone back to the Ozarks since. We still talk, still meet up, but we always go somewhere we know. Somewhere where we've been before, somewhere that feels small, even if it's not. That radio is still sitting in my garage. Every now and then I'll pull it down from the shelf, just to check, just to be sure. It's never turned on again, but I never threw it out. I don't believe in ghosts. None of us do. We're not the kind of people who scare easy or see shadows and scream. But something happened out there. Something we can't explain, something that doesn't fit into the world we know. We've talked about it a few times, always quiet, always serious. There's never a punchline, never a joke. And the part that still keeps me up some nights, the part that doesn't sit right, is that voice. It knew our names. Nobody else did. We didn't post our trip, didn't check in, didn't tell anyone exactly where we were. That voice shouldn't have known us, but it did. The sky was beginning to dim by the time I found a flat piece of ground beside the creek. I was deep in the Rockies, maybe 15 miles from the trailhead I'd started from that morning. I hadn't seen another person all day. No boot prints, no wrappers, no signs of a campfire. Just the wind in the pines, the sound of the creek, and the occasional bird call. That was the way I liked it. It's part of why I hike solo. Less noise, fewer distractions, and everything just feels more raw. I was tired, not exhausted, but the kind of tired you feel in your back and shoulders after a long day carrying a heavy pack. My legs were tight, my feet a little swollen. The pack came off with a sigh, and I set up my tent about 15 feet from the creek. I liked being close to water, easier to cook, clean, and refill. The spot I found was a shallow bend where the creek widened and slowed. Rocks poked up out of the surface, mossy and rounded from years of current brushing against them. There was a fallen log a few feet away where I could sit and cook. The ground was mostly pine needles and dirt, soft enough to sleep on. I made camp quickly. Tent up, bear hang rigged between two trees, stove out. Dinner was rice and dehydrated chicken. I sat on the log as it cooked, watching the sun drop behind the ridgeline. I boiled some extra water for tea. Everything was still, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're in a vacuum, like the world stopped turning. No wind, not even the usual rustling in the branches. The creek was the only thing moving, the only sound. I noticed it then, how loud it was, not rushing loud, but persistent. A low, constant murmur that filled the space, like it was trying to say something just below the surface. As soon as it got dark, I climbed into the tent and zipped it shut. I'm not the kind of person who sits up with a headlamp reading when I camp alone. I lie down and I listen. That's it. My ears stay busy even if my eyes can't see. That night, I lay there a long time before I slept. There was nothing out of the ordinary, but something about the place felt strange. I couldn't put a finger on it. It wasn't fear, just a low buzz in the background of my brain, like something was just slightly off. Maybe it was the silence after the sun dropped, or the way the creek never stopped murmuring. At some point I fell asleep, probably past midnight. I don't remember any dreams, just the sound of the water and the occasional tossing in my sleeping bag. When I woke up, it was just starting to get light out. That cold, gray light right before the sun climbs over the ridges. I always wake up early when I'm out there. Your body tunes to the rhythm of the land after a few days. No alarms needed. I unzipped my sleeping bag and sat up, stretching my arms. My back popped. I could see the shape of the trees outside the mesh of the tent, all of them dark and still. The light was enough to make out the line of the creek through the trees. The air was cold and damp. My breath fogged slightly as I exhaled. I reached for the zipper on the tent door and slid it down slowly, half asleep. And that's when I saw him. There was a man standing on a large rock across the creek, maybe 25 feet from me. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, looking straight at me. I froze. I didn't know what to think. My heart started pounding before I even realized it. I didn't move, just stared. He was tall, thin, wearing what looked like a jacket, maybe dark green or brown, and pants the same color. No pack, no hat, just standing there with his arms at his sides, looking at me. For maybe 3 or 4 seconds, we just stared at each other. My brain didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if I was awake. I blinked, and he was gone. Not walked away, not ducked behind a tree. He was just not there anymore. The rock was empty. Nothing moved, not even a ripple in the water. The trees were still. The creek murmured on. I sat there frozen for maybe a full minute. My hands were cold and shaking. I scanned the other side of the creek, looked behind the rocks between the trees. Nothing, not a single sound other than the water. I listened hard, thinking maybe I'd hear a branch snap or leaves crunch. Nothing, just that same low rushing sound. Eventually, I stepped out of the tent. My boots were already inside with me, so I laced them up fast and stood up. I felt exposed, like something was watching me. I kept looking back toward the rock, trying to understand what I'd just seen. I walked to the edge of the creek and looked for prints on the far side. Nothing. No marks in the mud. No broken branches. The rock was dry. I looked up and down the creek both ways. It was empty. I didn't waste time. I packed everything up in 5 minutes flat. Tent down, sleeping bag stuffed, stove shoved in my pack. I didn't bother with breakfast. I didn't refill my bottles. I didn't care if my bare hang was still swinging or if I dropped something. I just needed to move. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but I had my headlamp in my pocket just in case. I clipped my waist belt and started hiking fast, heart hammering. I didn't stop for the first 2 miles, just kept walking, checking over my shoulder every few minutes. The trail was narrow, weaving through thick trees and patches of undergrowth. I wasn't even sure I was on the right track for a bit. My hands wouldn't stop sweating, even though it was cold. Every time I turned a corner or passed a boulder, I expected to see him again, but I never did. After about an hour, I started to feel a little more normal. My breathing evened out. I slowed down, checked the map, made sure I wasn't heading in the wrong direction. I stopped to drink some water, ate a protein bar. The fear started to wear off, but that deep unease never really left. I thought about it all day as I hiked. Thought about how he looked, how he didn't move, how there was no sound, no sign, no footprints. I tried to convince myself I was dreaming. Maybe I was still half asleep. Maybe the light was weird. Maybe I imagined it. But it didn't feel like a dream. Felt real. More real than anything else that morning. The kind of moment that sticks in your chest like a needle. By the time I reached the trailhead, it was mid-afternoon. My legs were sore. My mind was wired. I sat on the tailgate of my car for a long time before driving. I looked back up the trail and just stared at the trees. Nothing moved. The sky was clear. Back at home, I didn't tell anyone right away. Felt too strange to explain. I tried to let it go, but I kept thinking about it. I pulled up maps of the area, checked for cabins or fire roads. Nothing close to where I was camped. No trails nearby, just backcountry, pure wilderness. I even checked missing persons reports just to see. There was nothing recent in that region. Weeks passed, then a couple of months. Life moved on, but something changed after that trip. I still hike, still camp alone sometimes, but I don't camp right next to creeks anymore. I don't unzip my tent without sitting up and listening first. I scan for prints, check the dirt around camp. I trust my gut more, and I've never gone back to that spot. Never even thought about it. Not once. I don't want to. I don't know what I saw that morning. I don't know if it was a person, or if my mind played a trick on me, or if something just happened to line up perfectly to scare the hell out of me. But it was real enough to make me pack in 5 minutes and hike like something was chasing me. Sometimes the wilderness just reminds you you're not in charge out there. You can plan, prepare, think you know every sound and shadow. But every once in a while, something breaks that pattern. Something doesn't add up. And when it does, all you can do is listen to your gut and move. That morning, I didn't ask questions. I didn't hang around. I didn't take a photo or look for more signs. I packed up and I left. And I think that's the only reason I slept well that night. It was a long weekend in early October when a group of us decided to get away from everything. Just a few friends from high school I still kept in touch with. We didn't need much. Just a reason to get out and a place quiet enough to forget about work, responsibilities, noise. Somebody had found this forest site online, not on any park maps, but in some old blog post. No name for it, just coordinates and a note that said, "You'll know it when you see it." We met up Friday morning, packed everything into 2 trucks, and hit the road before the sun came up. Took us nearly 5 hours to get there. The trailhead wasn't marked, and there were no signs. Just a small turnoff on a narrow 2-lane road, barely enough space to get our trucks off the asphalt. The forest looked old. Not overgrown exactly, but wild. You could tell it hadn't been cleared or maintained in decades, if ever. Tall pines, some leaning, the ground covered in thick needles, and a damp smell that hung in the air like fog even though the sky was clear. We hiked in about 2 hours. No trail, just compass and GPS. A few times we had to backtrack around thick brush or old down trees. There weren't any sounds out there except us. No birds, no wind, no bugs. That silence was strange, but I brushed it off. I've done enough backpacking to know forests can be quiet when they want to. We finally came to a clearing, maybe 50 feet wide, surrounded by tall trees that bent in slightly like they were listening in. In the middle was this old wooden post, sticking out of the ground at an angle. It was about 5 feet tall, rough-hewn, weathered, leaning slightly to the left. It didn't look like a fence post or a trail marker. No paint, no signs, just a post. But it looked solid, driven deep into the ground, untouched for years. We set up camp around it. There was enough space for 4 tents and a fire pit. The ground was soft but dry, and it felt like nobody had been here in a long time. No trash, no broken glass, no cut stumps. Just untouched forest. That night, after we'd eaten and sat around the fire for a while, we hung our lantern on the post. It wasn't some gas lantern, just a big battery one with a handle and a hook. We were using it as our camp light since the fire had burned down and no one felt like adding more wood. It cast a wide yellow light around the clearing. We'd packed it high on the post, and it lit up our tents just enough that we could get settled in for the night without stumbling. I went to bed around midnight. It had gotten colder than we expected, and the kind of silence that surrounded us out there was deep enough to make you feel like you were underwater. I slept light, restless. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up with this sharp awareness that something wasn't right. I didn't hear anything exactly, but I opened my eyes and saw the light from the lantern swaying through my tent walls. Not just a little flicker. It was moving hard, like someone was pushing the post or the lantern itself was being yanked side to side. I thought it was wind at first, but there wasn't any. The trees were still. The air was dead calm. I sat up and unzipped my tent just a bit to look. The lantern was swinging wildly back and forth, casting shadows around the clearing that spun and jerked like they were dancing. But they didn't move right. One of them looked like a person. Arms down, neck bent at an angle, feet not touching the ground. I froze, just watching it for what felt like a full minute. I didn't want to wake the others. I didn't want to move. It wasn't fear in the usual way. It was more like confusion turning into dread. My brain kept trying to explain it away. Must be a branch or the way the light hit something. Maybe the post is crooked and that's why it's moving. But it kept swinging, and that shadow didn't stop looking like a person. I got out of my tent and walked over, slow and quiet. The air felt thick, heavier than it should have. My breath showed in the lantern light. I looked up at the lantern. It was hanging solid from the hook, nothing touching it, but still moving as if someone had just given it a strong push. No sound except the soft creak of the metal hook and the shifting light hitting trees and tents. I didn't touch it. I just stared until it slowed on its own, finally coming to rest after a few more minutes. The human-shaped shadow was gone. Nothing but trees and our tents and the tall, dark lines of the forest. I stood there for a long time before going back to bed. In the morning, I didn't say anything to the others. We made coffee, joked around, hiked a bit. Everyone said they slept fine. I kept checking the post out of the corner of my eye. It looked normal in daylight. Old, cracked, with deep weather lines and a few faint stains. I figured maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was just tired and the light played tricks on me. But around noon, while packing some of our stuff into the dry bags, one of the guys pointed at the post and asked, "Hey, has that always had stuff carved into it?" I walked over and looked. The lantern was still hanging there, unlit now. The side of the post we hadn't been facing the night before had several names carved into the wood. Some old, some newer looking. No dates, just names. Maybe a dozen or so, all scratched in at different angles, different depths. At first, I assumed they were just from people who'd camped here before, maybe a long time ago. Then I saw mine. My full name. Not just initials or a common name. First and last. Same spelling. Same uncommon middle initial. The wood around it looked just like the rest, worn and faded. But my name was clean, like it hadn't aged. Like someone had just done it yesterday. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at it, then looked at the others. None of them noticed my reaction. I went back to my tent, zipped it shut, and sat there for a long time. I didn't carve my name into that post. I'd never been to this place before. None of us had. I would have remembered carving something like that. I don't do that kind of thing anyway. I don't tag trees or carve benches or write on bathroom stalls. It's not something I'd forget. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, not just swinging but jerking, like it was caught in the moment of falling, then held there, limbs stiff, neck tilted. I didn't hear anything, didn't see the lantern move again, but I couldn't shake that feeling, like the clearing was waiting for something, like we weren't supposed to be there. We left the next morning. No one mentioned the post again. I didn't bring it up, and I never asked the others if they saw anything during the night. We packed up fast and left the site cleaner than we found it. On the hike out, the forest felt different, heavier. The silence was louder than before, like the trees were pressing in just a little more with every step. When we got back to the trucks, I took one last look behind me. The forest swallowed the path we'd made. You wouldn't have known we were ever there. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about it. I searched my name online, with the coordinates, with keywords like camping, post, forest. Nothing came up. No articles, no forums, no reports. I even called a few ranger stations in the area. None of them knew the place, said that section of forest hadn't been actively managed or logged in years. Eventually, I stopped searching, but that post shows up in my dreams sometimes. Not the shadow, not the lantern. Just the post, standing alone in the clearing. My name staring back at me like it's waiting for me to come back. And the thing is, ever since that trip, every time I look at old photos from that weekend, I can't find the one I took of the post. I know I took it. I remember holding up my phone, zooming in on the carving, trying to figure out how it could be so clean, so fresh looking. But it's not in my camera roll, not on my drive, not in any backups. I don't talk about it much anymore. When people ask about that trip, I just say it was cold, quiet, and we found a cool hidden spot. Nothing special. But I haven't been camping since. Not in deep woods, not where there's no one around for miles. I still love nature, still hike, but I stick to marked trails, busy campgrounds, places with signs and people, because I don't ever want to see my name on something I never touched again. I was camping alone near an old fire road in northern Vermont. I had driven up a narrow gravel path that twisted its way deep into the woods. Public land, but far off the beaten track. The kind of place that doesn't see many people except the occasional hunter or someone like me, just looking for solitude. I'd picked the spot after looking over some old topo maps and satellite photos. The fire road hadn't been maintained in decades. It was overgrown, almost like a green tunnel in some places, and the only way in was by foot or a good four-wheel drive truck. I parked a couple miles away, then hiked in with my pack and gear. It was late September, leaves just starting to turn, cold at night but not yet unbearable. I found a small clearing just off the road, maybe 15 feet wide, ringed by pine and maple trees. A few deadfall branches were scattered around, so I gathered enough for a fire and got set up before dark. That first night was like most nights when you're out there alone. Quiet, but with every little noise standing out. A chipmunk rustling in the leaves sounds like a bear. The wind in the trees sounds like whispers. You get used to it, though. The fire helped. I sat there, ate some dehydrated stew, and listened to the woods settle down. By 10 or so, I was in my tent, wrapped up in my bag, reading with my headlamp until I started nodding off. Sometime around midnight, I woke up. I don't know why. It wasn't a dream. I don't remember dreaming. It was just that kind of sudden, alert wakefulness where your body knows something's not right. I turned off my headlamp, sat up in the tent, and listened. For a few seconds, there was just the usual wind through the trees, creaking limbs, maybe an owl far off. Then I heard it. A woman screaming. It wasn't right next to me. It was off in the woods somewhere. Far enough that it echoed, but close enough that I knew it wasn't a coyote or some other animal. It sounded human, a real scream, not one of those quick yelps either. It lasted several seconds, high-pitched, strained, like someone screaming not just in surprise, but in fear. I froze, just sat there in the dark, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe it was someone on a distant road, maybe a radio echoing weird, maybe some animal that just sounded strange. But my body didn't believe it. I reached for my flashlight, unzipped the tent as quietly as I could, and stepped out. The woods were still. The fire was out, just some faint glowing coals. I clicked on the light and swept it in an arc across the trees. Nothing, just trunks and brush, long shadows, no movement. The screaming had stopped, like a switch flipped. I stood there a few minutes, listening, waiting, but I didn't hear it again. I eventually went back inside the tent, though I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. I just laid there, ears tuned for every noise, hand close to the knife I kept by my bag. The next morning, I told myself it must have been a coyote. They can make sounds that'll chill your blood, and your mind plays tricks on you when you're alone in the woods. I even laughed a little, just to shake it off. I made coffee, packed up a day pack, and hiked along the old fire road. There were deer tracks here and there, and once I saw what looked like moose prints, but otherwise it was just woods. Mossy stones, wet earth, fallen trees. Peaceful. I didn't run into anyone. Didn't see another soul all day. I came back to camp around dusk and rebuilt the fire. I made a small one this time, just enough to cook and keep warm. The temperature had dropped more than the night before, and the wind was colder. By the time I got into the tent, I had that uneasy feeling again, but I told myself it was just nerves from the night before. That night, right around midnight again, I heard the scream. Same exact sound, same distance, same kind of panicked, drawn-out cry. It lasted 4 or 5 seconds and then cut off like someone had covered her mouth. This time, I didn't even get out of the tent. I just laid there, gripping the handle of my knife, heart racing. I didn't hear footsteps, no snapping branches, no voices, just that one scream and then total silence. Not even wind. I don't know how long I stayed awake, but the sun took forever to come up. When it finally did, I packed up camp fast. Didn't even make coffee. I hiked out fast, barely stopping to rest. I felt watched the entire way. The air felt heavy, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Back at my truck, I still didn't feel safe. I kept looking over my shoulder while I loaded my gear. Even driving out, I couldn't stop glancing at the rearview mirror. It was late afternoon when I finally made it back to town, and I told myself to forget it. Just some weird experience in the woods. No harm done. Weeks went by. I didn't talk about it to anyone. It stayed in the back of my mind, just something I couldn't quite explain but didn't want to think about too hard. Then one night, I was scrolling through news articles online, reading local stories about the region, just curiosity, really. I like to read up on the places I camp in, and that's when I saw it. An old article from about 10 years ago. A woman had gone missing not far from where I'd camped. Her car had been found parked near that same fire road, abandoned. No sign of struggle. She told friends she was going hiking alone for the weekend. They never found her body. Search teams looked for days. Dogs, helicopters, the works. Nothing. After a couple years, her case just faded into the background. There was a photo of her. Black hair, kind eyes, wearing a red jacket. That part stuck with me. I remembered something else. Just before I heard the scream that second night, I had turned over in my sleeping bag, trying to get comfortable, and I glanced through the mesh of my tent. For just a split second, before I closed my eyes again, I thought I saw something red through the trees. I told myself later that it must have been the firelight reflecting on a leaf or something, but now I wasn't so sure. It started bothering me more after that. The screaming, the location, the fact that I had camped maybe a few hundred yards from where that woman parked her car before vanishing. I started thinking back, trying to remember everything in detail. The scream didn't sound like something from 10 years ago. It didn't sound like memory. It sounded current, fresh, real. I started wondering about echo, how sound bounces in the forest, how it carries. Maybe it was someone else entirely. Maybe it was a coincidence, but it didn't feel like one. The way it stopped the second I got up. The fact that it happened at the same exact time 2 nights in a row. Like clockwork. I haven't gone back there since. I camp a lot. Been doing it for years, but that spot near the old fire road? Never again. Something about it felt off, like it wasn't just me out there. Not ghosts. Nothing supernatural. Just something wrong. Something unfinished. The woods are big, and people disappear in them more often than most realize. Some never get found. Sometimes the woods keep secrets, but sometimes I think the woods try to speak. A few months later, I called the sheriff's department in that Vermont county just to ask if the case was ever solved. The woman who went missing. I gave them the name from the article. The man on the phone paused, said it was still open but cold. Then he asked why I was asking. I told him I'd camped in the area and heard something strange. He said people report things all the time out there. Animals, screams, echoes. Then he thanked me and hung up. It didn't help. The way he said it, like he'd heard it before, like I wasn't the first. I still think about it sometimes, especially when I'm camping alone. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night for no reason. Heart pounding, ears tuned for a sound I don't want to hear. I've heard all kinds of things in the woods. Coyotes, foxes, owls, people partying in the distance, but nothing like that scream. It was raw. It was real. And whoever it was, I don't think they were alive anymore. But I also don't think they were resting either. Not a ghost. Not a haunting. Just a memory trapped in the trees, echoing back, over and over, waiting.